Have you had your rice today? If you're from a Nigerian household, you know Sundays are for rice and stew. So in today's video, I'm going to share how to make this very spicy, delicious stew using just few ingredients. Okay, so we're going to start with a freshly washed chicken drumsticks. In my house, we only use drumsticks. So the very first thing I always like to do with my drumsticks is to go ahead and spice it. And to do that, you guys, the very first thing I love to do is use my ginger and garlic, because I often notice that the chicken they sell in this country, like America, I don't know what it is, but their chicken always have this very weird taste. So in order to always get rid of that taste, ginger and garlic is always my best friend. So that is exactly what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to go in with some nut cubes for seasoning, and also for spicing you can use whatever spice you like, but I love some thyme, adobo, and also seasoned salt. And also for my chicken, I always like to kind of spice it very well before I then go ahead and put it on the stove to cook. And another thing is, once I spice my chicken, you guys, it makes it so much easier for me when I'm making this stew. So I don't end up using a lot of spices when I'm making this stew. So while the chicken is doing its thing on the stove, I'm going to go ahead and start with the tomatoes. And I love me some very nice fresh tomatoes, you guys. And for the stew, I always like to use some red bell pepper, onion, and tomatoes, like fresh tomatoes. And I love using a lot of onions, you guys. So I'm going to be using I always do it like two or three bell peppers, two onion, and then some tomatoes. And also don't forget your spicy pepper. Like, this pepper is actually what is going to make the stew really spicy and hot. So I'm going to also go ahead and add my pepper, and then go ahead and wash up everything. I always like to kind of take my time to make sure I cut through the pepper, the tomatoes. Then I'm going to go ahead here and blend it. I always like to blend my tomatoes not so liquidy. I don't like it when it's so puree. You know, when you blend something and it's really puree, I don't like that. I like my tomato to kind of have a little bit of texture to it. You know, I love my stew to have kind of texture. So I always kind of use I think the crush setting on my blender. So we're going to bring that to boil to get rid of all the water from the tomatoes. One thing I notice with tomatoes is they have a lot of water, and whenever I go ahead and kind of start making my stew immediately without first of all drying the water from my tomatoes, it ends up leaving my kitchen a whole mess. Like, it will keep boiling, keep getting all over my stove, my countertop. I hate that. So in order to prevent that, I always prefer to kind of boil the tomatoes to kind of get rid of all those water before then frying my stew. This next step is actually optional. It all depends. Sometimes it kind of comes in as a mood for me, you guys. Sometimes I like to fry my chicken, sometimes I don't. But the reason I like to fry my chicken is because if you don't want your chicken to kind of scatter all over your pot, you guys, if you want your chicken as a whole when making your stew, you have to go ahead and just fry it a little bit. You know, you don't need to fry it as if you're frying a chicken you will eat with jollof rice. Your jollof rice chicken is always kind of harder. This one is just to kind of make it come together so it doesn't end up kind of going in bits and pieces inside your stew. So that's the main reason I always like to fry my chicken. And after that, I'm just going to go ahead and cut up some onion, because we're going to need some onion to make the stew. My son is over here dealing with me, you guys. I'm breastfeeding, so in case if you hear all this, that's from him. All right, so after you fry the chicken, you want to go ahead and leave that oil, because you're going to use that oil you used for the chicken to fry your stew. That's normally how I like to do it. So I'm going to go in, add the onion, maybe fry it for few minutes, maybe a minute or two, and then I'm going to go ahead and add my tomatoes. Like, This is just an easy way to do it, and I often notice that whenever I fry my stew this way, you guys, because the spices and everything from the chicken is just going to marinate, and just, it's just going to smell so good inside your chicken. That's why I always prefer to use whatever oil it is I use to fry my chicken or my beef or whatever meat I use for the stew. That is the main reason I love to use the oil to fry my tomatoes. And also, I don't know, please comment if you're like me, if you like to also go in with some tomato paste when making your stew. I'm just so used to this. It kind of adds a little bit of very nice color to your stew, and also for the texture. There's just something tin tomatoes does to tomato stew that I absolutely love. So that's the reason I also like to add some tomato sauce. And then over here, I'm going to go ahead and add the stock. You don't want to forget your stock, because that's where you have all your seasoning, all your spices, everything. And I normally don't like to spice my chicken before adding the stock, because once I add the stock kind of helps me know, kind of gauge if the stew is okay, or if it needs maybe more salt, more pepper. As you guys saw, I added few more spices, after I added my stock. So I love, 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 love my fresh spices. Sometimes I like to use parsley or basil. Today I'm going to be using curry parsley. Oh my gosh, that's what I'm going to be using for today. Sometimes I actually also use spinach. It all depends, but I like that kind of fresh, um, kind of looking vegetable or something inside my stew. But because I'm making this one for YouTube, you guys, I didn't put a lot of it. But normally I would just put a lot of maybe spinach, or just to make it look, more vegetably. But yeah, you guys, this is just all there is to this recipe. I hope you all learned one or two things, because I know rice and stew is something everybody probably is, all we all know how to make rice and stew, but of course you might pick up one tip or the other from this video. Yeah, you guys, till my next one, I will see you all very, very soon. Bye.